Or do you like regular mustard?
Oh, let's put
Or Dijon? Okay. How about you, Daggy?
I'll tell you what, do you want
Dijon.
hot water? Please, tap
You
water.
like Dijon?
Yes, please.
Tap water's okay? Okay.
Tap water the poor kid drinks? How about you, Daggy? You're going to have... We'll quickly make nice lunch. What time is... Oh, the poor kids are starved.
That's
Let's
right.
take
Why don't you feed your company? What's the matter with
Eddie,
you?
the kids went... Oh, they went so much. You know, they went... You want white
They went
bread,
where?
honey?
Come on, you lived on bread
Yeah, oh, I love
and brown water for how many years?
Yeah, but now, hey,
I gotta go
that doesn't
now.
mean that you want to
I'll be
live.
right back.
You want white bread?
And that was once a day.
Yeah.
Do you know the piece of bread was this square and this thin? That was it. God, it's
How
like-
could you live off
I
of that?
want you to know.
I
That's,
can't-
do you know that feeling of being always hungry? How horrible it is. And Rosh Hashanah, the Germans knew there was Rosh Hashanah. And Yom Kippur, they said, well, the Jews don't eat Yom Kippur, so they wouldn't give us our portion.
Oh,
I mean, they were.
well, they were
so
cruel.
inhum- Do you know, I can't almost believe that people can be that inhumane. That one human being can be that inhumane to another one. But they were. That's why when I went to Poland, I wasn't crazy about the Ukrainians. They look like killers. I'll show you the pictures.
Are your video camera on?
Anymore, right?
Why not?
Because of what's going on around here. I mean, it's too much, and I have so much I want to say, and you're not giving me a chance. You keep doing this, and you keep doing that, and you keep saying I should get involved in something. I'm involved in too many things as it is. So I want you to just take pictures of Freddie and Aunt Bella.
Who are you talking to, Uncle Ed?
Am I talking? I didn't think I was talking. I'm talking to Freddie.
This is a monologue. This is what they call a monologue. In a
I'm
conversation, it usually involves two
I'm
people.
talking to Freddie because she's the prettiest young woman around. How
Hey,
about
you
that?
haven't seen me when I let my hair down, Uncle Ed.
Oh, really?
You
How
see?
is he? How is he when he lets his hair down?
I don't know. I don't think I've ever seen him with his hair down either.
Hey, can you tell me something? You know Christmas is the only holiday where people sit around looking at a dead tree and eating candy out of their socks? Did you know that? And that's my joke for the day. The stand-up comedian Ed Miller has spoken.
Did you know that gullible is not a word?
That's right. I know it's not a word.
It's not in the dictionary.
Well, I'm putting it in the dictionary. I'm going to write it in. Did you know that? What did I know, Freddie? Did you? Did I know that? No, there was something else too. Let's see. All of a sudden, my mind went blank. And if you say what mind, I'll kill you. What was the? There's something else about the dictionary.
I was just going to question the word went.
Where did you went? What do you mean went? All right, if you say so. You want me to kill this whole tape? Is that what you're after? I'll do it. I'll tell you the whole story about my whole life.
Well, you said your mind went blank.
Yeah, my mind is always a blank.
There you go.
There's nothing up in that brain anyway.
Now, how come you have blue eyes?
I don't have blue eyes.
What
Okay.
color are
I
they?
got gray eyes. What color are my eyes, Bella?
I don't know. Green.
There you go.
Here, open your mouth.
No!
Why? I'm
Why
hungry.
is he going to look at
Nobody feeds me. I'm
Why,
hungry.
he'll put you with
No,
that.
I want to see your teeth.
He'll put you with that.
Oh, you got a space in there. Oh, you need a brush.
He'll put you with that animal there. What
Yeah.
was it? That big cow or something? What was it with it?
I'm going to take another. You know, before I
Seal.
go
He'll
to
put you with the seal.
before I
That's it.
do it,
Ah! Your lips are bleeding.
Okay.
I'm going to get another
No.
cup of coffee. Anybody want one?
No.
I just happen to
Okay,
realize
what
I
do
need
we
one.
do now?
Oh, I didn't
Now it's
start
all
it.
up to you.
Okay. How do you want to start it?
Oh, I didn't start it.
Okay.
I don't have a very good angle here.
Oh, it says there's no microphone attached.
What do you want her to tell her? But don't take too many
I
pictures.
think
with-
I think it'll be just fine. I don't know what we're going to talk about.
Should I tell you start when what happened to me? Would
Well,
you like that?
Freddie, your report is on concentration camps,
Auschwitz.
and on Auschwitz in
On
particular.
Auschwitz alone?
Yeah.
So maybe we start with the very beginning, or Aunt Bella, maybe you two could just start a dialogue about Auschwitz, maybe how you got there and what you know about Auschwitz.
Okay. I
Kind
was
of
a
thing.
little girl when the war started. Gee, that's difficult when you don't, when somebody doesn't ask you a question. Anyway, I was 7 years old when the war started, and we had different armies come to Poland. First was the Germans, then the Russians, and then the Germans. But finally, when the Germans came, after going through a lot of pogroms and anxiety and things like this and being hidden, we finally wound up in Auschwitz. You are writing mainly on Auschwitz. And
Could you explain more what a pogrom is?
pogrom is where they gather people and they kill them. Or they gather people in one spot and then they ship them sometimes to work to labor camps, but some people they just kill outright.
Why did they call it how do you spell it?
Pogrom, P-O-G-R-O-M, pogrom. That's just really gathering people and either killing them or...
Do the Germans call it that, or did you?
No, that's what it was called, general, that was called the pogrom. But what happened, you are mainly interested in Auschwitz, not in the beginning. And when they rounded us up to take us to Auschwitz, we were taken on cattle cars. And because the area where I was born, Boryslav, which is eastern Poland, the area was being surrounded by Russian because they all fought for that area because they used to have oil wells there. So everybody wanted that area. So when they were taking us finally to Auschwitz, there was the last transfer from Boryslav. And at that time, they couldn't get directly to from Boryslav to Auschwitz, so they had to take us around through Austria and through Hungary and back to Auschwitz. Auschwitz is not far from Krakow. And when they brought us to Auschwitz, they brought us in cattle cars and they separated us, men from women. At that point, I was still with my father and my brother and my mother. And once they got us out from those cattle cars, it was horrendous because they chased us. We had the little clothing that we had with us, we had to leave. We really had, among the four of us, maybe a little small suitcase because everything was already confiscated and taken away from us. And they separated men from women, and I didn't even, it was so fast that you couldn't even say goodbye to your parent, to your father or my brother, and I never saw him after that. And they separated us, and then the famous Dr. Mengele, who was really a murderer, but he was well known for doing experiment on children and adults, and he used to even do experiment on twins. Anyway, he came by at the selection, which meant he looked at the group and he came over and looked at them and he pointed he had a crop with him and he pointed with the crop, you go to one side or to another side, and you never knew which side was good, except when you saw sick and very little children going, you thought that perhaps you had a little better chance. And I was very tall. I was at that time, there was in 44, and actually I was not quite 12 years old, but I was tall for my age. And when he came over to me and he asked me in German, wie alt bist du, which means how old are you, my mother spoke fluent German, and she said that I was 15 because she was told by some inmates as they were taking us from the cattle cart, if they asked my age to say, since I'm told to say I'm much older. And he looked at me for a second and he pointed his crop to one side and he pointed the same crop to my mother. Later on we found out that some people was from our side survived while the other were taken to gas chambers and killed, because after they selected us, they took us to a barrack, they made us strip, throw all our clothing off, and they shaved our heads. And then they took us to a shower, which was a quick going over underwater, and there was no soaps, no towels, and then they brought a lot of clothing, not the same clothing, just a lot of rags, and they say grab whatever you can and that's what you're going to wear. So I grabbed something which didn't fit, and even the shoes, one was a wooden shoe which was coming apart, the top from the bottom, and anyway I grabbed those things and I wore them, and they took us to barracks, and there was, in Auschwitz the camps were divided. It was called Birkenau, and Birkenau was part of Auschwitz, but that was the worst part. And in Birkenau they had several camps, by numbers and actually by letters. And they took us to Birkenau to Lager B. There was the second Lager B. There were about 30 or so big barracks, and each barrack had tons of, it's really not a bunk bed because it's like 3-tier boards built, and on each level you could have 7 to 10 people actually on each floor. So you just lay closely to each other on the wooden bunks. They got us that, and in the morning they would always count us, and in the evening sometimes they counted us 3 times. There was no place to run away because each camp within Birkenau was surrounded by barbed wire, and the barbed wire had electric going through them. So there was really no way of running out, but they counted you continually. And we were there just for a short time, and I got very sick. I got scarlet fever, and I was taken to another barrack. I called it infirmary. It's really no such thing as infirmary there, but there's a barrack like any other barrack, but they put 6 people there, and that barrack was divided in 3 sections. The ones that were not quite as sick, the middle, and the very sick and infectious diseases. And because I had scarlet fever, they put me with infectious diseases. And I was there for a while. There was nobody took care of you, or nobody had any medication, nobody wanted. But some of the doctors were also inmates. And one of the doctors was there. She came with us on the same transport, so she knew me. And when she found out that they're going to have a selection and take the sick people, especially from that department that was the worst sick cases, typhoid and things like this, that they're going to put them in the ovens, they told me that they put me back in the barrack, even though I was very sick, but they said I should go back to my barrack. And I went sick to my barrack, and I found out the next day they had a selection. All those people went into the gas chambers. They were executed, they were killed. And somehow, even though I was sick, I stayed in that barrack until they decided to move us to another camp within Birkenau, to K camp. And there also, they didn't have special work, but they used to take us and have us move rocks. Back and forth you had to carry rocks, just to keep you occupied and just to make your life more miserable. Obviously there was very little food. Food was scarce because you got, once a day they made like a soup, they said, which was like weeds and brown water, and they gave you something like a piece of bread, which was maybe 1 inch high, a square piece, and you got tea, what they called later on, which was brown water. That's all you got the whole day to eat. And anyway, so they moved us to Barrack K, and there they did not have latrines. They had those big pails where people had to eliminate, and at night everybody went into the pail. So I had one day, and during the day they would, in the morning they would get a few inmates, catch whoever they wanted to, and they made them take those pails into the latrines and empty it. And I lifted it, and it was so heavy, and I could just barely walk, and the ground was full of mud and rocks, and it was really terrible, but I carried it to the latrine and I brought it back. We were in that camp for a short time. Then they moved us to Camp C, Lager C. There was a working camp called Weberei. Weberei means weaving. What they did is they brought a lot of rubber, chunks of rubber, and all kinds of old rags and fabric, and you had to make braids. The braids where you had a table, we all sat at one table, and everybody had a nail, and you attached the rubber and the fabric to the nail, and you did weaving. Looked like you're almost like making your hair, like making, what is this called? Braiding, thank you. And they expected you to make 20 or 25 meters, and that was almost impossible because the rubber was thick and you had to separate it. The scissors were dull and the fabric was not good, and we did that for a while. And sometimes the Germans would come and try to check it if that was strong, and if it wasn't strong, they would break it, they would beat you. So I was lucky when they came to me that it moved only a little, so I got only one hit. But other people were badly beaten for a while. Could you stop it for a minute? Because I have to say, did we lose it? Well, I was working for a while in sea lager, and my mother then got very sick. She got sick because her legs got very big. She was from hunger. You get like elephantitis, which your legs become 3 to 5 size your size, and you can hardly stand it. And she went to one of those barracks that I call infirmary, but there was no such thing as infirmary. And they checked it out, and I somehow managed to stay with her at that point. I had a temperature, and somehow I was able to stay there with her. Now what happened, that was towards, I guess, November or December of 1944. And at that point, some of the crematoria were still working and some were already demolished because they knew that the Germans knew that they were losing the war and the Russians were surrounding the area, and they did not want anybody to know what they, in other words, they did it, all those horrendous things, but they didn't want the rest of the world to know about the crematoria and things, so they demolished some. So I have a picture which I will give you of one small crematoria. I still have it, which I took just recently on a trip to Poland. And we went to that barrack and we stayed there for a while, and we didn't know what was happening on the outside, but you heard gunfire and things, so you knew that the Russians were coming closer. And in January of 1945, the Russians finally, the Germans tried to evacuate the camp. They were trying to take the people that were able to walk out, and the rest they were going to put fire to and burn. And I guess my mother couldn't walk, and I was very weak. And we said whatever will happen, will happen. We stayed in the barrack, but luckily they didn't have time to put fire to the rest of the barrack, so that's when we survived. Finally the Russians came, and it was in January 1945, the end, I believe the 28th, and they liberated us. And when the Russians came, they were very nice to us, but they didn't have much food. In a way, it was lucky. They had potatoes and bread, so whatever they had, they shared with us. And it was a good thing, because in many camps, the inmates got very good, rich food, and they were not used to it, and they got very sick, and they died, many of them. So they survived, because nobody realized that when you suddenly don't eat for a long time, just live on this meager water, soup, and bread, and then you suddenly have chocolate and butter and things, that you cannot take it, your body cannot take it. So anyway, many of them got sick and they died. Anyway, you have mainly for the concentration camp you
Yeah.
need? You don't need afterwards.
Right.
Yeah.
I got that from the tape. so
From the
it'll be-
tape, yeah. Well, this is, anyway, it was horrendous in the camps, because they beat you, they mistreated you, they counted you 3 times a day, and there was nowhere to escape, because one woman from the line, when she stood and counting, she ran towards the wires, and they grabbed her before she could get in and kill herself, and they beat her to death, practically. You know, she died on the ground because they beat her with their guns and things. In other words, they could do it, but they didn't want them to take their life on their own. And it was a very tough thing, and thank God that I was liberated when I was, then I was able to survive it. But that really doesn't tell, but I'll show you some pictures, and I'll show you what it looks like. But if you have questions, go ahead, sweetheart, ask me.
when you were saying that they sent people to the ovens, would they
Yeah.
put them in the gas chambers
They put them,
first? Or?
yes, what they did is, we found out later, they took them what they called a shower. And there were shower heads, so people thought that they were going to shower, but through the shower, instead of putting water, they put Cyclone B. Cyclone B is a poison gas which slowly kills you, and you suffocate, you die a horrible, horrible death, and then they put people in the ovens, and they just burn them to death. And if that wasn't fast enough, they made some graves and they shot people and buried them half alive in the graves.
How many people would they usually kill at once? Would it be huge?
Oh, huge amounts they could go. I don't know exactly how many, but in Auschwitz alone, I think that 1.5 million Jews died. They had other people, they had some gypsies, and we had some gypsies with us too in our barracks, and they had some Poles. They were caught during the war, that they were like criminals or war something they had, but mainly they had Jews. And Birkenau was the most horrible camp, was part of Auschwitz, and that was the worst part of Auschwitz. And that's where I was.
What made it the worst part?
Well, the main Auschwitz was built with brick because originally it was made a camp for soldiers. They thought they might use it, so it was entirely differently built. I mean, they're still horrendous. I mean, the way they took care of them was very bad. But they had also international, like, soldiers that they caught there, so it was not as bad. But Birkenau was strictly for extermination of mostly Jews. And it was just horrendous. And it was the good Lord help that I survived this.
Were they constantly bringing more people to the concentration
Yes, they were
camps?
always bringing trains. We came in August 1944, and there were every time from Poland, from Czechoslovakia, from Hungary they were bringing, but there were a lot of Hungarian Jews there that came very early. The camp was built much earlier, so they came there. Yes, and there was, I think, over 1 million people perished there, 1.5 million.
So a train every week,
There
or
was, oh no. There was on an hourly basis. Different trains were coming from different places, or they were coming from different countries all the time. Like we came from Poland on the tracks, which now, by the way, I just went finally to Poland after, in September of 2003, to see my hometown. I was I didn't recognize it much. And then when I went back to Krakow, to Poland, I also went to Auschwitz just to see it. And of course, Auschwitz does not look now the way it did when I was there, because what they did when we went to Birkenau, they had to preserve the buildings, so they stained the buildings, and the grass is growing now. So it looks almost, and there's still wires there, but when you look at it, it does not look, nothing is happening there. Grass grows, buildings are all brown, and it wasn't that way. They fixed them, so they were just holes, when the wood didn't fit together, there were just barracks with holes. Wind would come, rain would come, snow would come right through it. It was horrendous. And I have some pictures, and they will probably help you to explain what a barrack looks like, because I took it now on the trip. Somebody helped me. I was very emotionally disturbed almost when I went there, but I wanted to see what it looked like, but it's nothing like when I was interned there.
In the barracks that you stayed in, were they insulated at all, or were they just...
No insulated. They were just wooden planks. You slept on wood, and the wood was the whole barrack, and it was a big barrack. Must have had 15 bunks, those 15 long on each side, and there was like a big divider in center. And you only got there at night to just lie down in your part, and there were about 6 to 10 people in each bunk.
was there any
on
heat?
3 layers.
Was there any heat at all?
No, there was nothing.
And how cold was it?
Body heat.
Outside, I mean.
What you see, I went through summer to the winter, and it was cold. I guess I was so emaciated and so skinny that there was nothing, that no bugs even got the chance to.
But in the winter time, was there snow on the ground in the winter?
I'm trying to remember. It must have been some snow, because in December,
Yeah.
and we had to go out at 5 in the morning from the barrack for being counted. Before 5, they used to call Zählerpell. In other words, everybody gets out and we count you, and you stood for sometimes an hour or 2 or 3 outside in rows of 5 and 10 and whatever it was, but it was 5 in one in back of another. It's a complete group would stand in each barrack, and finally the capo and the German would count you. And many times they made you kneel in the snow or in the mud or in the rain. They just made you kneel until they were ready to come and count you, and then you went back either to barracks or to the work. And then during the day, many times they counted you, and at night when you went back to your barracks, you were counted. So you were counted, and you were not a human being at that point because you were only a number. And as you can see, I have a number on my hand. I forgot to tell you this. They did it with a needle. They put a little ink and here on the side, and they took a needle and quickly, with a needle, they put a number. And I am A24977. I'll never forget that number.
In the morning, how did they wake you up? And if you didn't wake up, what would happen?
Oh, no, they came and yelled, "C'est l'appel," believe me. You woke up, everybody, and you had about a minute or two to just march out. There was no such thing as you didn't wake up.
Okay.
You would have been dead on that bunk, on that wooden plaque. They would have killed you. So you walked out.
Like, how long were the work days? How long did you work for?
You worked right after they counted you. You went to work and you worked till night.
Like, how late do you
I
think?
don't know, since we had no watch and you couldn't tell. I couldn't tell whether it was Monday or Sunday because they worked you every day. And you lost track of days and hours and time
So just,
because you were
no
not a
breaks
human,
at
just
all?
no breaks, no. You were just not a human being, and it was very hard. But it's amazing what a human being can endure, and life happens to be very precious. And if you can survive just another day or another minute or another hour, you'll do anything to survive. So it's very hard, but somehow we overcame all this and we survived. Not too many survived, but I guess maybe I was stronger than the rest.
So
And
were you saying that you were the only?
I was the only child in the whole group of barracks. There were some children that they had Mengele took for experiment, but I didn't know it in that time. But our entire, not only our barrack, but the whole camp that was in didn't have any others. But I was much taller than most 12 years old. And
So
I
you think
was
you were the only child?
in the whole camp? There were many camps.
Yeah.
In that camp, I was the only one.
How many people in that camp?
Oh, I have
Approximately.
no idea. 1,000 or more.
And you
Or
were
more than that. I really don't know because there were about 30 barracks and several must have been a few thousand people in each individual
And you were the
camp.
only
and there
kid.
were one after another, and camps were built one after another after a third. About barracks, road, barracks, and there were barbed wire. Next, barracks, road, barracks, another wire, and that went in rows like wires.
and everybody
also,
in the camp pretty much knew that you were a kid?
Well, nobody worried about anybody else. I was just there, and nobody thought about it. But one thing, when I was sick, the woman knew how old I was because she was a doctor from our hometown and she was working there, and they liked me and they really felt that they wanted me to
Probably
to
gave them a lot,
survive
yeah.
little, just to survive a little, and they sent me to the
Yeah,
barrack.
you
where
probably
my
gave them a
mother-
lot of hope, being one of the only kids.
Maybe, I don't know, but when we were liberated, there were some 20 other kids that were liberated, that they were experimenting.